Come with me. You need to see this yourself. That's what the old security guard whispered, his voice heavy with a pity I didn't understand. I followed him into the back room of the grocery store, expecting a mix-up or a misunderstanding. Instead, I looked at the live surveillance monitor and watched my wife of 17 years leaning against a dressing room wall, whispering into her phone. Her voice cut right through the cheap drywall speaker. I told him I was on the phone with the school. He's so easy. Just one more night, and then I'll tell him. In 20 seconds, 17 years of trust didn't just break, it evaporated. But I didn't scream. I didn't storm the hallway. I just smiled, walked out, and started a timer. If you've ever been severely underestimated by someone who thought you were too blind or too weak to fight back, hit that like button, subscribe, and buckle in. Because today's story isn't just about a broken heart. It's a masterclass in what happens when a former military analyst uses precision tactics to systematically deconstruct a betrayal. My name is Nolan Chase. For nearly 2 decades, I believed that loyalty meant never checking the shadows. I thought trust meant peace. I spent my days managing large-scale construction projects, and before that, I spent 7 years as a military intelligence analyst. In my line of work, you learn to see things most people blink past. Inconsistencies, structural gaps, behavioral anomalies. But when it came to my own home, I was blind. I chose to be. I thought the woman I shared a mortgage, a bed, and 2 beautiful children with was my safe harbor. But standing in that gray, fluorescent-lit security booth, watching her twirl her hair and laugh about how easy I was to fool, the illusion shattered. A cold, quiet nausea started right behind my ribs, settling heavy in my stomach. The security guard looked away, shifting uncomfortably. "I figured you'd want to know, man," he murmured. I just nodded. My hands didn't shake. My breathing stayed perfectly rhythmic. I walked back out to the main floor, calmly pushed the car to the parking lot, and loaded the grocery bags into the trunk. When she finally stepped out of the store, smiling like an angel, she slid into the passenger seat and offered a casual lie. "Sorry, honey," she said, checking her reflection in the visor mirror. "School stuff." The principal wanted to talk about the kids' schedules. I reached over, gently kissed her forehead, and smiled. "No problem at all. Everything good." "Perfect," she said, leaning over to kiss my cheek. There wasn't a single hint of guilt in her voice. No hositashchen. She was flawless. But inside the quiet cabin of my truck, a tectonic shift had occurred. I didn't rage. I didn't demand to see her phone. Rage is messy. Rage gives away your hand. Instead, I went back to doing what I was trained to do. I observed. That night, I lay perfectly still beside her in the dark, wide awake, memorizing the rhythm of her breathing. I watched the silhouette of her arm sliding under her pillow, tightly clutching her phone like a prize that needed protection. I had 1,000 burning questions, but I also had discipline. And discipline is what makes a man dangerous. Over the next 2 weeks, the anomalies piled up like bricks. A new gym bag in the closet that never seemed to hold dirty clothes. Mystery volunteer nights that always ran 2 hours late. A sharp, expensive new perfume that didn't match the floral scents I'd bought her for years. A locked phone screen that used to lie wide open on the kitchen counter. I didn't say a single word. Instead, I opened a hidden encrypted file on my laptop and rebuilt something from my old intelligence days, a tactical log. I tracked every outing, every excuse, every subtle shift in her vocal pitch when she answered a question. Then I called an old favor, a digital forensic consultant I had helped through a brutal, mudslinging custody battle years prior. I handed him the parameters, and within 48 hours, he handed me a data dump. Every deleted text, every hidden application, every cloud-stored voice note. The first file I opened stopped the breath in my lungs. It was a photo time-stamped exactly 12 minutes after I had paid for our groceries that afternoon at the store. She was still inside the building, standing near the dressing room corridor. She wasn't alone. A man in a tailor blazer was standing just inches from her, his hand barely brushing hers. But it wasn't their proximity that made my blood run cold. It was her face. She was looking up at him with a relaxed, radiant half-smile, The exact smile she used to give me before the bills, before the kids, before life hardened around us like concrete. Now, that smile belonged to a stranger. The movie versions of these stories always feature shouting matches, broken plates, and dramatic tears. Reality is much worse. It's just a silent room, the blue light of a laptop screen reflecting off your face, and the sudden, crushing weight of realizing your entire life was built on a fiction. I didn't confront her. I didn't cry. I just upgraded my plan. First, I retained a top-tier family law attorney, a woman known in legal circles as an absolute shark, specialized in pre-litigation asset protection. Together, we built an airtight, undeniable timeline of infidelity. Next, I sat down with our financial advisor. I didn't give him the emotional backstory. I just asked one clinical question. If a marital asset is being moved in secret, how early can we trace it? He leaned back in his leather chair, crossing his arms. Depend on how clever she thinks she is. As it turned out, she wasn't clever at all. My wife had been quietly siphoning small, incremental amounts from our joint savings account for the past 6 months. She was transferring them to a private debit card registered under a shell LLC. The initials of the LLC matched his name perfectly. I signed the legal forms without a flicker of hesitation. I froze our high-yield joint accounts, separating my earnings into a private trust. Then, my attorney executed a brilliant maneuver involving our home. Years ago, my father had co-signed our original mortgage loan, and a specific, overlooked clause in the deed stated that the property could not be sold, leveraged, or borrowed against without the express written consent of the primary co-signer's estate. She didn't know it yet, but the safety net she thought she was weaving out of my hard work had just been pulled clean out from under her. 3 days later, I scheduled a meeting. She thought we were going downtown to a co-working space to meet a potential corporate investor for my construction business. Her lover thought he was showing up to consult on an expansion project. Neither of them realized they were walking into a trap. I sat alone in a sterile, glass-walled conference room. Clean, professional, completely forgettable. 2 empty chairs across from mine. On the table sat one legal pad and one thick, manila envelope. When they arrived, they walked in side by side. They weren't holding hands, but their shoulders brushed with a familiar comfort that made the lie feel incredibly cheap. He wore his sharp blazer, looking smug. She wore the exact perfume I had gifted her for our last anniversary. I stood up. The moment her eyes met mine, the color completely drained from her face. She stopped dead in her tracks. The man beside her froze like a rookie deer caught in a rifle scope. "Sit," I said. My voice was completely flat. They sat down like obedient school children. I didn't yell. I didn't slam my fists. I didn't toss the envelope across the table like a cheap TV drama. I just slid it across the polished wood until it rested against his knuckles. Inside were bank statements highlighted in bright yellow, text logs printed in chronological order, high-resolution surveillance photos, the LLC incorporation filings, and her digital fingerprint on every single fraudulent transfer. She didn't even open it. Her lips trembled. "Nolan, I can explain," she whispered. "I'm not here for an explanation," I replied, looking her dead in the eye. "I'm here to end the story. You two started this behind my back. I am ending it to your face." The guy tried to clear his throat, shifting in his seat, attempting to muster up some sort of alpha confidence. "Look, man, you have no right to ambush us like this in a professional environment." I let out a short, dry laugh. "You ambushed a 17-year marriage, buddy. I'm just returning the favor legally." I stood up, buttoning my jacket. "I've already filed for legal separation. The house assets are frozen. The joint account is under a forensic fraud investigation. And you," I added, staring directly into his shifting eyes, "should probably hire a very good lawyer before the IRS calls you about that fake LLC." What neither of them realized was that a storm was flying in from out of state. My sister, Rachel, a high-profile corporate divorce attorney and a fiercely protective single mother, had booked a flight the second I shared the data files with her. Her text to me had been simple. "Don't let her spin the narrative. I'll be there Thursday." By Friday morning, My wife was already in full damage control mode. She started blasting texts to our mutual friends, family members, and neighbors, spinning a tragic, sanitized tale about emotional distance, growing apart, and sudden marital unhappiness. No mention of the gym bags, the dressing room corridor, or the stolen money. But my data had arrived before her texts did. Certified documents, time-stamped photos, and financial logs had already been shared with the people who mattered. One of our oldest friends called me that afternoon, his voice trembling with shock. "Nolan, if this paperwork is real, she just completely nuked her own life." That evening, my wife pulled up to the house. She walked up the steps, reached for her keys, and realized the cylinder had been completely changed. She punched her code into the electronic keypad. The lock beeped red. I had officially revoked her access, backed by an emergency ex parte order Rachel had pushed through court that morning due to financial dissipation. Through our smart home security cameras, I watched her stand on the front porch. She didn't knock. She didn't ring the bell. She just slowly collapsed onto the top step, buried her face in her manicured hands, and wept bitterly. But the real climax didn't happen on my porch. It happened on Monday morning at her workplace. My wife worked for a prestigious, high-end private healthcare group. Their corporate ethics policy was notorious. Any employee involved in active financial misconduct, fraud, or reputational liability was subject to immediate termination. And she hadn't just cheated on me. My forensic consultant had discovered that she had used her corporate travel card to book 2 romantic weekend getaways at a luxury resort, logging them as continuing medical education seminars that didn't exist. When HR called her into the office, she tried to claim I was a disgruntled husband fabricating rumors. But corporate compliance departments don't care about feelings. They care about paper trails. I had provided the actual resort folios, her signature, and the matching dates of her lover's location data. She was suspended on the spot, pending a full audit. That night, my phone lit up with a 6-minute voicemail. Her voice cycled through the entire spectrum of human panic. It started with angry blame, dissolved into sobbing begging, dipped into terrifying silence, and finally exploded into pure, unadulterated venom. "You don't get to destroy my career just because your feelings are hurt. Nolan, you're a monster." I didn't reply. I deleted the voicemail, set my phone face down on the coffee table, and turned my attention back to my kids. We were sitting on the couch, eating popcorn, watching a movie. For months, the house had felt tense, dictated by her volatile moods and sudden departures. Now, it was steady, quiet, safe. Looking at my kids laughing in the glow of the TV, I realized I hadn't destroyed a marriage. I had salvaged a family. The final blow came 48 hours later. Rachel pulled up a background check on the lover. It turned out the man in the sharp blazer wasn't just a homewrecker. He was a serial financial predator with a buried restraining order from another woman in a neighboring state for coercion and asset theft. I forwarded the public court links to the healthcare group's compliance officer. Bringing a high-risk liability into contact with vulnerable corporate assets was the final straw. Her suspension was made permanent. She was fired. A few weeks later, we sat in a quiet local cafe to sign the final mediation papers. She had no makeup on, no jewelry, no armor left. "I didn't think you'd ever find out," she whispered, looking down at her coffee. "Not because you're dumb, just because you trusted me too much." I looked at her, seeing right through the ghost of the woman I used to love. "I'm not here to punish you," I said softly, signing the last page and standing up. "But I'm also not here to save you. I already forgave you." That's how I let go. Living well and protecting your peace is the ultimate form of justice. If this story showed you the power of staying calm under pressure, smash that like button right now. Leave a comment below and tell me, what's the most calculated piece of karma you've ever witnessed? Don't forget to subscribe for more deep dive stories, and we'll see you in the next one.